keep you for ages and hopefully get out to some sunshine during lunchtime. But at the start of, or at the end of last year, I ran a thing with the junior campus where we had a look at teaching as inquiry, and there was a unanimous groan when they heard that that's what we're going to be doing for our teacher only day. But I kind of tried to make a bit more sense, and then they kind of got it. Now I understand, like, I went to Tanya's session last term in the science department. Just bear with me if I'm going to go over some things again. So the purpose this morning is to very quickly reiterate what we already know about teaching as inquiry, to have a very brief look at how that fits in with appraisal, and more importantly, the RTCs. So there's two schools of thought. There's the school of thought that think, right, we've got a 3-year cycle to gather evidence for each of the RTCs to get our registered teaching. Or there's the school of thought that thinks you shouldn't prescribe annually which ones we have to cover. And that's kind of where I'll be coming from in kind of trying to show that if we are practicing teaching as inquiry effectively, we don't need to have RTCs prescribed, because during an inquiry you'll cover maybe up to 8 of the RTCs. You'll have evidence for against 8 of those criteria at any one time, but your teaching as inquiry is driven by student needs. And so rather than what you're doing in your classroom being driven by, I've got to gather evidence for these 3 things, you're actually practicing according to your students' needs, which is kind of where my school of thought is, where my argument is. And on top of that is the possibility that you might record that in a digital environment. Now I understand that some people don't want to do that, that's fine, you can kind of come to a hard copy kind of version. So the first part of what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about briefly about teaching as inquiry, appraisal and the RTCs, and then I'm going to show you the digital platform that we're going to use to record all our evidence. Does that sound alright? But please feel free, if you've got strong thoughts and opinions and how you see it working, we kind of need to iron those out now. But for me it's a very individual journey. It's your teaching practice, it's your journey. There's no prescribed kind of template that you're going to have to follow. My portfolio will just give us somewhere we can gather evidence, and that evidence doesn't always have to be paper-based either. So it can be, so Kay asked me to record myself this morning, so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to bung it on my portfolio because that'll be part of my evidence under leadership. So it's all those sorts of things. So you could record yourself running a meeting or whatever, and that's your evidence right there. You could record student voice, you could record yourself teaching. So your evidence becomes more than just a paper-based thing to be signed off. Plus with my portfolio, you're not, if you leave Hargest, you can take that work with you and carry it on. It just builds up and you can access it anywhere in the world. So that's pretty good. Okay, so just go on here now. So I'm sorry if this is sort of a little bit repetitive of what you know already. The theory behind teaching as inquiry, it's been around for ages. Everyone thinks it's kind of a new thing. But since the curriculum document came out, it's been in there, but it's kind of been one of those overlooked pages. It's under the effective pedagogy, and then it's got all these other things. And then on the other side of the page is teaching as inquiry, which we kind of seem to have forgotten until now. So it's just about gathering information, in our case on our students, and looking at what that information tells us and what we're going to do with it, so what. And it's what we do all the time. It's what you do when you're driving to work and you're reflecting on your students and what they did that day, or why something worked and why something didn't. It's all that practice, but now it's about being accountable and recording all that. So it all starts with reflection, which is what really appraisal should be about, reflecting on your practice and setting your goals. It's about reflecting against the registered teacher criteria, and it's about sort of reflecting on very specific acts of teaching that you're doing. What makes reflecting hard is because we have to really question ourselves. So that's what I mean before when I said it's a really individual journey. So we have to really question our own practice, and sometimes we are good at looking at what's not good, but it's important to identify what we do really well as well. And it's like when you're writing a CV, you don't really want to look at what's really good about yourself, it gets quite hard. So, not only looking at the when things go wrong, but also looking at why did that work really, really well for that group of students or individual. And that's all three things, the appraisal, the teaching's inquiry, and the attitude, all about reflection all the time. I'm whizzing through this, I'm aware of that. It's also about pushing yourself, so this journey should be about really pushing yourself out of, thinking out of the box. If something's not working, throw it out the window, put your hand up and say, stop that, really, sorry kids, that didn't work at all, and I'm going to rethink that, and that's okay. It's okay to make mistakes in front of the students, and it's okay to make mistakes in front of your colleagues, and go back to the drawing board and really put heads together and think, right, what can make this work a bit more effectively? A lot like what you're doing with science and, you know, trying to engage those kids that want to go into the trades and stuff. That's thinking out of the box. Okay, so to start thinking out of the box, one of the things we have to do is we have to look at what is the problem and redefine it. Okay, really make sure we understand what the problem is. Challenge what the main cause of that problem is. Okay, it could be that you're always doing the same thing. I've been teaching this subject for 8 years and I've done the same first lesson every time I introduce. Well, something might be working on. Okay, and 5 reasons why. I think when you did your inquiry into, is it e-learning?
Yeah.
Did it? Yeah. And you looked at the 5 reasons, there's 5 reasons why. Okay, and then shift some paradigms, shift your thinking around it. So, you see how it really is quite individual. Okay, so that's the diagram from the curriculum document, straight out of it. It's been there for a long time. If you look at your handout, if you go to your handout, there's sort of that being broken down a bit more. Okay, if you have a look at that handout there. Okay, so this tells you a little bit in a little bit more detail what you're going to be doing as a teacher at each stage of this inquiry. And so the first thing is that kind of redefining part, a little bit of research on your part. Okay, getting some information from experts. You might know somebody else at the school that you know has done this really well in the past, or at another school that you know have done it really well, giving them a call, or maybe going and doing some observations, etc., etc. Talking to people and getting some real research into the problem. Then taking that, ideas about what you've found from your research, thinking about your context and putting it into that context and going, right, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. This is the deliberate act that I'm going to do. And then what happens when you do that? Actually getting on with it, the actual day-to-day learning, what effect is it having? I did that, that was quite different for me. What effect did that have on my students and their achievement? And of course, because now we're accountable, the RTCs are making us accountable, we're now going to gather information. So we're not just going to say, that was really cool, blah, blah, blah. We have to have the information. And how you can gather that in the digital environment is quite different. Because you don't have to just have it written down. You don't have to have the students write it down. You can record them working. You can record yourself reflecting. You can get a dictaphone, or your phones will record voice if you're driving home. And you know, some people say to me, oh, but I do all that driving home in the car, why do I have to do it? Well, do it, record yourself, talk to yourself in the car, whatever, and you can upload that, and it's there, the evidence is there. And then you're gathering that information, the impact that change had on, often if you're focusing for your inquiry on a small group of students, a whole year group, you will maybe take 6 students that you're going to focus on, and what you're doing for them almost guarantee you it will have an impact on what happens with the rest of the kids. Yeah, and if you've done an inquiry, you probably see that, or you've inquired into your own practice and done something deliberately for a group of students, you'll see that it usually has an impact on everybody else as well. And that cycle then starts again. So then you look at what's the next problem? What's the next problem? So your inquiry can take a term, or it can take 2 weeks, or it can take a week. It's just that ongoing thing. And so some things will be small, so it could be this group of students don't get fractions at all. What am I going to do, like really do, to focus, to really help them get that? And that could take me 3 lessons done, and that's my inquiry done. I changed a few things and it's done. It could be, how can I motivate boys in my class to read? I'm going to get them motivated. That could take a term. You see, so it depends what your inquiry is as to how long it takes. You might look at that year, is it year 12 that are doing that science? So you might look at that and, you know, that's going to be a long inquiry. That could be a year-long inquiry for you. Okay, so if I've done leadership inquiries in the past and they've taken a whole year. So it depends what your inquiry is as to the length that it goes for. Now, the other thing I've got here is this, when we're thinking about appraisal, the relationship between appraisal and teaching is inquiry, because who's an appraiser here? Yes, so a few appraisers here, so you kind of want to be clear in your heads how it all links up. This diagram here kind of brings in that whole idea of you as an appraiser also being a mentor and a coach for somebody. And at the teaching as inquiry level, that's what you are, that's kind of what your role as the appraiser is. You're not ticking boxes, you're coaching, you're listening to them, you're listening to their journey and having a look at that. And then you're helping them making sure that you know that they're carrying out that practice, but are they gathering the evidence and information that you as an appraiser will then need as it goes up? Because appraisal is formal, and it will stay formal, it needs to be formal. Teaching as inquiry is an individual's professional journey. And as you're practicing in that way and carrying on your day-to-day teaching, you will be meeting the RTCs. You see? Does that make sense? Yes. So one of the things that Andy is now doing is he's saying, right, this year we will focus on these 4 registered teacher criteria, and you'll gather evidence for these 4 registered teacher criteria. For me, that's a conflict with this practice, what we're saying is effective practice. Because for teaching as inquiry, we're looking at student need and how to raise student achievement, and we're not really thinking about the RTCs just yet. And we're going to carry that out, and then we have a look. While I was doing that effective practice, I met all these teaching criteria. Yes, so probably your focus group for the teaching as inquiry will most likely include students that are slightly below, not achieving, will most likely include Māori students. And then when we look at the registered teacher criteria, which I gave you all a couple of, if you didn't know it all off by heart, if we look at some of those, you know, let's say you're looking at, I'll use that motivating Māori boys to learn. I've done some things, I've gathered some evidence, and I've got a group of boys that are now reading for pleasure. Okay? I know that's a simple one, but okay, so somewhere in there I'll have demonstrated my understanding that I know how my ākonga learn, because I'll have done something in that inquiry to motivate those students. Okay, respond effectively to diverse language and cultural experiences, various strengths and interests. If I'm motivating boys, Māori boys in particular, to read, I would have done that. I would have had to do that. Okay. Analyse appropriately, use information which has been gathered formally and informally. I will have done that, because looking at motivation, it's a hard thing to measure when you have a lot of formative assessment that I will have undertaken there. So you can see how they kind of jump all over the place, but you're gathering bits of evidence, and that's just one inquiry, and you've got to meet more probably than 4 criteria. Okay? Conceptualise, plan, implement an appropriate learning program. Well, you can't tell me that every single week you don't have evidence for that criteria. You do, don't you? Every single week. So, to say we have to focus on 4 is a little bit odds for me. I've got lots and lots and lots, but I'm going to skip through all those. So the first thing, just so everyone's clear, is that we have to focus the inquiry. So analyse the data, what are the learning needs, how could this information inform the inquiry, what are the important influences on the students and on you. So it could be that you don't have a regular classroom, it could be that you have a class that has to move all the time, and that could be an important influence on what's happening. Thinking about target students, so in this case that I call them tier 2, those that are just below and model students. Okay, and then getting on with the research. What do I need to know? Who can help me? Where can I find information? That's the first part. Next, what strategies, and they're going to be based on evidence, are most likely to help my students in their learning? Establish clear learning outcomes. What is it that you want? Sometimes some of the things we put in our teaching inquiry aren't measurable by a test, so that's when the formative assessment and all that comes in. But there has to be some sort of measure. Sorry, this one was for a literacy thing, but and then evaluate the effectiveness of your teaching. What will you monitor? What are you keeping an eye on? So it could be that you're taking a video at the start of your inquiry, of your class as a whole, and then you could undertake your inquiry, put some deliberate acts of teaching, make some changes, and once you start to see a change in those students, start videoing that change, and that is really powerful evidence. We've got to be brave to video ourselves. What happened as a result? So then you're summarising what happened as a result, and you should be able to see this was a direct result of changes I put in place. So one of the things I did a couple of years ago, my worst subject area was maths, awful maths teacher. I put my hand up to that, not very good at all, didn't really get very good results. And then my principal said, right, you're doing the A level, which is like an all contract, but for maths. You're going to do that. Oh. And it changed me. I was forced to change everything about how I taught maths. And now I love teaching maths. So it's, yeah. And I saw growth in the students, and huge growth, but it was definitely because of changes that have been made. And then sharing and reflecting with colleagues. In a digital environment, that's quite cool, because you don't have to actually physically meet all the time. Like, if we all share all our pages with each other as a group, and then there's room on the My Portfolio, which I'll show you in a second, to comment. So you can comment on each other's how you're going, or if you know of a good link or whatever that's relevant, then you can share all that. So it's pretty yeah. So the whole thing, all 3 things, appraisal, RTCs, teaching inquiry, it's not about improving competence. Sorry, it is about improving competence, not proving competence. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so I really whizzed through that, but you guys are okay with that? Yes?
Excuse me,
yeah.
I think that little concern about focusing on the 4 RTCs, I don't think it's an issue where the horse is in front of the cart. So where we deliver 2 or 3 teaching inquiry things over a time, those will inevitably contribute to the 4 selected.
Yeah.
So there's no loss.
No, there's no loss. What I'm saying is I think you could do it and you find that you're covering a lot more. I mean, you can focus on the 4 if you want to.
Well, it doesn't exclude you from focusing on whatever you want to with inquiry. It's just your contribution to the ADCs. is somewhat
maybe.
limited.
Yeah,
And then of course over 3 years,
you're gonna
you
have.
could refer back to something last year that did
Yeah,
as well. I don't think it excludes documentation from,
Yeah.
I think it's what Aloma's trying to get to, is it's a somewhat artificial record keeping of how you roll as a teacher.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. And my concern is, you might do it that way, my concern is that some people might interpret that as, I only have to work on these 4 areas of my teaching this year. And my concern is that they would drive the practice rather than the student needs.
and I'm guessing that concern from another point of view is that at least those people are focusing on those 4
Oh,
areas.
on 4.
They might not be picking up your
Yes.
program otherwise.
Yes, that's true. That is true. So, maybe I wasn't clear as well, as what I'm saying is if we're going to do this trial, we don't have to do those 4. But we don't have to, we
Yeah.
do have to cover those 4, but we don't have to focus on just those 4. See, in my mind, I would rather, what we're doing be, and in 3 years, you're going to be covering those.
So
The RTCs are not rocket science. They're everyday practice, that's all they are, you know, any good teacher will be doing all of those just about every week.
I think that selection of the 4 is less about doing it,
More about
more about
evidence.
providing the evidence of
Yeah.
doing it. I don't think anybody thought,
Yeah.
oh, well, this is what I have to focus
Yeah,
on,
that's
this is
okay.
what I can make sure I have evidence for.
My concern is, would be those few that would perhaps think.
my take though was slightly different. I thought we may, and hopefully I'm wrong, that we have to provide in-depth evidence for those 4 for our term 1 appraisal. No, for this year. And then we just continue on this as a separate thing. That's what I took from what Angie said.
No, Nadia emailed me and she asked for all your names if you're going to be doing the digital thing, and so she will have access to your evidence online as well. So you don't have to have necessarily just those 4.
It's not for this year, it's for next year.
These four.
So it's the appraisal cycle.
That wasn't
that
made, you're right,
started.
that was not made
Wasn't
particularly
made
clear,
clear.
that we're focusing on those over the course of the year, and at our first appraisal meeting, we may not have evidence for those, we should have, because you've got the, but
There's
that,
some.
it's about gathering evidence on those 4 over the course of the year, and that was not made clear.
He did briefly.
He did say that actually, but
Say
just, yeah, he's lost it, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, it's the appraisal cycle that's starting this year, that will complete next year.
So it's the same as
Yeah.
last year for this year.
What I want you guys to be really clear on is that those 3 components all feed into each other. That's clear, and that's obvious, and it's clear. And what I want us to be trialling is a platform where we can gather that evidence in a way that isn't repeating itself. Does that make sense? So you're not having to put that there, that it all kind of overlaps and you can use it all together sort of in a seamless, almost effortless, once you understand the platform way. And it's a really simple platform to use, so.
And so it'll be easy to, I mean, I'm guilty of, when I do stuff for appraisal, I chuck it in a box to sort out in the year or the start of the next year.
Yeah.
If I chuck it in a box too.
One of the things you have to do is kind of get in a habit of giving yourself 20 minutes to have that reflection time, or to upload something, or just kind of having that 20 minutes, whether it's at home or at school or whatever, that you do that. Otherwise it will build up and you'll go, like, why people go, you put it in some, like you say, you put it in a box.
Can I just check something? There's several people in this group who are appraised for different roles, like this leadership appraisal and teaching. Are we just concentrating on the teaching with this digital one, or are we, is it
Yes, we
possible?
can,
to do
unless
both?
you're confident, you could do both.
Hmm.
You could do both. I'm going to put my leadership one on here
Cool.
as well.
Okay, yeah.
So I'll just show you what they might look like at the end of a year. So that's kind of what it could end up looking like. So that was one I did on the Inspiring Principals program, so they use this as well. So Newfoundland was doing that this year. And so it was an inquiry into leadership or something that had to change at your school. You had to have quite a big one. And I was relatively new at the school, and at year 7 and 8 they were a little bit wild children, and they had no desire to learn or any pride or anything, and they had no activities, extracurricular stuff going on or anything like that. It was a little bit weird, but so that was my sort of inquiry, was into that. And one of my biggest, and that's hard to measure. How do you measure that you've changed attitudes amongst students? So of course video, so I recorded them. That was a big part of, I sent the children out with video cameras and they interviewed each other about changes, and interviewed the year 8s, comparing what was like in year 7 to what they were like in year 8, and so on. I won't go through that. And then down here, what you've got is that rather than having all that written out and going on and on and on, not that that's a long one, but there are 2 parts to my portfolio. You create a page and you create journals. Does that make sense now? And then what happens is on your page you can get your journals just to give you sort of the heading of each journal entry that you put on, so you don't end up with a whole massive page with just writing and writing and writing. So it just comes up with the recent journal entries, and it makes the page a lot shorter. And research, things that I found out from research, all sorts of different bits and pieces. So that's kind of what it looks like at the end, you know? A lot of work really, yeah, but that's the end of an inquiry, what it sort of builds up looking like. What I thought we could have, I had a little play at what ours might look like this year, but of course it's individual, so it's up to you. Once you go on there and have a play, you kind of see, oh yeah. So,
Well, just what you've got up here, so I'm an appraiser, right?
yeah,
So one of you dudes does this thing and I'm happy to be appraising you, I'm going to have to weasel my way through this thing. I'm going to have to find my way through this and understand it. And
but
the
once,
implications.
yes, as long as if you don't have to edit it, it's pretty easy.
Is it?
Yeah,
So
you
all
just have to look at it
appraisers
as a
could
web page.
potentially
Yeah.
have to face this process.
You have to look at it as a web page. You just look at it as a web page.
There'll be a lot of people who aren't in this room who are also appraisers that
Yeah.
will need to come to terms with that.
Yeah.
That's my point.
You can print it off, but which
Yeah.
defeats the object. But you won't be able to
Can't print
see.
off videos.
But you won't be able to
can't
see the
print
videos and all
videos
that.
and
No.
see it. Right.
They kind of.
Well, you
Yeah.
take your laptop into your appraisal and
Yeah, you take it back to
And you-
your
and
appraisal,
you-
and you'll be there to drive it. won't you?
yeah, and you're driving, and you might say, well, what would you like to see, Elle? And you'll say, well, I want to, talk to me about this inquiry here, and I can take you through that. You don't have to see all of it, because the evidence is there that it's being done. You don't have to go through it with time.
Nadia, for example, is going to sit down with me, we're going to go through it.
Yeah, because she will have to
Yeah,
have a look at something, but so will each appraiser.
yeah. But like Sam says, you take your laptop with you to the appraisal interview.
And you drive in front of your appraiser,
Yes.
and they don't therefore have to, yeah, okay, I can understand that, but usually in my appraisal meetings, I'm already familiar with the results and the drama before the appraisee gets into my office, so I know which questions to ask.
It's just like looking at a web page. If you're
Yeah.
not working on
Look,
it,
I'm not being at all critical, I'm just thinking ahead here, that we will actually have to make sure that all appraisers that of these
Understand that.
people
yeah,
are aware.
yeah.
And ideally, the appraiser looks at that more than just at the end of the
Yes.
cycle, don't they?
Ideally.
They look at that and can then communicate to the person they're appraising that perhaps
Yeah.
it's about time that it's been 3 weeks and nothing's gone on, or any problems having with evidence, or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So Al's point there is that, I think the point you're making is that as a pilot study,
Our
it's
appraisals
going to
are-
have to involve more than just those who are doing this.
Yeah,
That's
Can
true.
I ask a question, because you say it's just like looking at a web page, so can anyone search under our name in my
no,
portfolio?
no, you have to give
Permission.
they have to join my portfolio,
Right,
and then you have to give them permission to see your page.
okay.
That's what I'm saying, when I said before, if we all share with each other,
Mhm.
then you can see what everyone's doing. You share, or you can share with an institution. So you could say everyone at James Harding College can see my page. I don't mind, it's up to you. I don't know. So what you can do is you can create, this isn't actually one page, you can create a collection, and in that collection you can have related pages. So you can see there I put the inquiry, appraisal goals, RTC's evidence, and James Harding College, so the school's goals. So I had a little play weekend, and kind of that's what I did, was I put the RTCs down. Now, you can see that under criteria 5, show leadership that contributes to effective teaching and learning. So I've put teacher only day in there. Now what it's doing is, when I write in my journal, it's coming up automatically there. So I don't have to copy and paste it into another area or anything like that. So I created a journal. It's like a,
Alana, my big fear, which is why I'm sort of backing off from doing it electronically,
yeah.
is after doing distance learning, obviously digitally, I spent probably a great deal of my time, as you say, playing or finding out that I'm doing this or reformatting or changing. And I feel that my time can be better spent than actually digitally trying to get things right.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
So for those of us that aren't digital natives,
Yeah.
um,
You could still do this. I have a folder that I can show
yeah,
you.
folder. Yeah, but it's also, I think, something that's worth considering too, that people don't get too carried away with the playing aspect.
Yeah, this doesn't have lots of bangs and whistles, which is kind of good in a way, so you do just get on with the putting your evidence in there. So it doesn't have like flashy things. Everything in it, and it's really quite simple. If I go edit this page, oh actually, I'll go into a blank one, because that's easier. So, if I go here and I go, it's just edit. The student, you can create your accounts for your students too. So here you've got options down here, media, journals, general. So if I went to journals, and what I was doing, what I had on there was the most recent journal entry, just give the first line of what's in that journal entry. And everything is just click and drag. It's just a simple click and drag like that. And then it's giving me, they're my journals. And it's asking me which journal do you want to share. Which of your journals? So I might go here. See, I went to a conference, so I created a journal when I was at the conference and then just did all my notes in there. And so then every day where I was updating, that just came up as a little banner. That, that's evidence of your professional learning.
Excuse me, Alana.
Yeah.
You mentioned to Jodie, do you have a folder option, hard copy version of this?
Yeah, it's kind of not this as such, but it's how you could keep all your evidence.
There's a bit of an irony in it, but
Yes, I know.
for this trial, is there any sense in some people doing the the other hard copy version?
I don't know. I have to ask him. But I think there's a two-pronged thing here. There's the digital side of it, and the other thing is about your thinking around the whole
Yeah,
process. Yeah. So for me, the really important part is your thinking around the whole process. And for some people, not necessarily people in this room, but for some people that's a big shift, And so the thinking is really important. This is just a tool. So for me, if you're doing it in a hard copy, or if you want to do it in a digital environment, that's, for me, digitally, I can use video now, that's great, that's the big plus for me, I can use voice, you know, at my level in particular, to gather student voice, because they don't want to sit and write stuff for you, so that's important, a good way for me to gather that evidence, so.
I'm just gonna ask you a really probably stupid question, but just thinking that I'm about to start teaching a year 7 class French on Wednesday, and if I were to video a session of that where I ask them for all of the things they know about France and French, and then at the end of the 7 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever, I can't remember, I video the same thing, doing, you know, what do we know now sort of thing. So is that the sort of thing that, like,
Well, that would be evidence of your students learning, but you need to think about what were you doing as well.
yeah,
What were you trying?
Yeah, what were you trying to do? What deliberate things did you put in place to improve their outcomes?
right,
Yeah. Deliberate activity, what deliberate activity do you want to do? It's hard for me to stand here and show you this here because actually you need to get on and have a go. There are 2 James Hargis colleges on my portfolio. There's Grant apparently registered and then I've gone unregistered. So you just look for me and you join the one with me. If in doubt, join both. Okay, so when you go on and you register, you can go to institutions and you can ask to join an institution. It's also hard for me to show you stuff, how to work it, because your version will look different slightly. Who's been on? Did you get that little picture, the cartoony picture at the front?
That was last week.
So,
I was thinking I could jump on, but I can't remember my password.
oh, can't you?
just thinking in terms of access to this, it can be done from anywhere, like my smartphone or my school laptop.
Anywhere you can go online, yeah.
Right, okay.
So you could put a widget on your phone and just.
I don't think it's got a widget yet, but you'd have to just go online on your phone and go there on the website. But it works fine like on an iPad. So if I've been at conference, I've gone on it on my iPad, it works fine, it doesn't have any glitches or anything like that. Seems to work quite smoothly. But I, just thinking here, these collections here, I think that's the best way to do it. So you create pages, and there's tutorials on there. If you go on there, on the right-hand side, there's tutorials for how to start using it and stuff like that, so.
There's also really, something I noticed in my 10 minutes was there's a thing down the side that says people are online now if you want to chat to them.
Yeah.
And I was like, freaking out right now, got out of that bit really quick.
Yeah. Only education uses this,
Yeah.
so it's not, you know, it's not, there's something like,
And obviously you wouldn't
there's
chat.
140,000 users in New Zealand schools at the moment on my portfolio. Tower Intermediate in Wellington, they've got like really amazing digital portfolios of teachers and students, and this is what they use. So I think if you can go on and create a page, that'll be awesome. If you can go on and create a collection, that'll be even better. So then you can sort of have, but you might want to set it up differently. And when you create a page, I'll just go on and create a page. You can set it up how you want. You can have it all in one column, you can have 3 columns, you can have 2 skinny columns and a big fat one in the middle. There we go. So you will have, I think you have like a cartoon at the front of yours, and it's got like a journal, so if you want to create a journal, you click on a little journal picture, create pages, click on the create pages picture.
So do you create a collection for each different inquiry you do?
No. No, no.
A collection, and there is a collection of your inquiry?
Yeah.
And then it has stuff.
I'll just show you, I'll just show you.
See, I can't even remember how I did it.
And Aloma, we can add you on this, so that you can see what we are doing.
Yeah.
So if you're a slow learner like I am, I can do that and then ask you to check whether I'm doing it right or not.
Yeah. So here I've got create a page. So if I go to create a page, it just creates a blank page. I've got to give it a title. And I've got to give it a little quick description. And what's really useful is if you tag things. So you might want to tag RTCs, Jones Hargis, you might want to tag those. So then when you want to quickly search for something, those pages will come up. Okay. Then once you've done that, you go save. And then your page is created. That's your page, it's just blank. And then from there you can go edit the layout. So it gives you all these layout options. You choose whichever one you want, however way you like to work. And then you see you've got share page here. So I would go on and find you guys and share. So then you get a message on your dashboard that said you've been invited to, you've been given access to another page.
So will you be, as aligned with having catch-up lessons or?
Yeah, we'll have regular catch-ups. But if I go back to your question about collections, if I go back to the collection I created, so you basically, what you can do is you create a collection, you give it a name, like 2014 evidence gathering, whatever you want to call it. You go there, and in there you get add a page, and you can create different pages, but it means they're all in one place, like the little tabs that I've got there. So you can have, there's obviously not a lot of stuff in there because we haven't done anything, but like I created that page, but it's still kind of in the same area.
So when you created that page, did you have to cut and paste this stuff in or
No, I just typed that up.
So did you type in all the criteria? Where did you get that from?
Yeah, from the RTCs.
So you typed it in?
Yeah.
So we must be able to cut and paste it in, right?
Yeah, you can do. But it took me about 10 minutes. I think it would have taken me longer to try and cut and paste the whole. And I didn't want everything. I just wanted the key sort of little bits for myself,
Okay.
you know. But then
Don't cut and paste it.
everything I'm going to write, you know, I'll have journals, and they will just come up automatically into that page because I've told them to.
Yeah, that was my question is, do we need to know about those
Yeah.
hyperlinks or whatever?
Yeah. So I'll just show you. It's really. I know it sounds like I'm saying. I didn't understand this at all either until we got thrown on it and said, this is what you're using. Go away and play. And literally that is. But it doesn't take long at all to get familiar with. So if I was going to do one now, what I'd do, I'd go edit this page. And I would go journals. And I want a recent journal entry. And I want it in here under criterion 1. Okay? Because I might have a journal about relationships or something. Whatever that one was. And then I would go down here, and these are all my journals. Okay? So I might go, right, I want this journal here to pop up whenever I put anything in that. I want it to update on that RTC page as well, under that criteria, because that's what it's relevant to. So I never actually have to go into that RTC page and put in my evidence. It's automatically going to be generated from somewhere else on the page. Does that make sense? It's hard for me to stand here and show. The best would have been in the computer room. Yeah, so I think that's what's important. So what I would say now is get the thinking straight about all three of those things, those three elements. That's what's really important. Think of what your inquiry, forget about the RTCs for now. think about what your inquiry is going to be for this first few weeks, or in a couple of weeks, what's your inquiry going to be? And then try and get that on there, and start getting some evidence for that on there, or start gathering it somewhere. Does that make sense? So who hasn't registered yet? Because we could do that maybe now, before you go.
What sales station?
Instead of doing inquiry, it's doing
Cool, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, that'll be me. I'll put it down as Paul on there or
I was down in I just wanted to pass that on.
You need a video of that at 9
No, they just need people to quit looking like to show, oh yeah, oh yeah,
You should have a whole class for you.
every kid's gonna talk for an hour.
Are you gonna video them?
Yeah.
Those new